Good evening, everyone. It's 7 p.m., June 13th, 2024, and I'd like to welcome everyone in the room and those participating online as I call to order this meeting of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. We value everyone's input and have made sure to dedicate a portion of this meeting to hear from you. We look forward to your comments during that time as it's indicated on our agenda. Mr. Lyman, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Anderson? Here. Mrs. Storm?
Here.
Mr. Kinsey?
Present.
Mr. Price? Dr. Pryor?
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. If you're able, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Liming, the treasurer's report.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held May 9th?
So moved.
Mrs. Dorn. And then Mrs. Anderson. Questions, corrections? Please call the roll. Sorry, did I hear
She
something?
just said it looked good.
Okay, good.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Storm?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price? Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report dated May 31st?
Second.
Mrs. Anderson and then Mrs. Dorn.
Just a couple things I usually point out each meeting. It looks like we want to end the fiscal year with 25% of our revenues from the state. Seems like that percentage goes down by 1 or 2 every year. And for the expenditure side, this is really good. Our percentage for salaries, wages, retirement, and insurance is 76% of our budget. A lot of districts I know are 80 or over, so that's have the rest of the financial report included in the agenda. And the reports are posted on the website. So if you have any questions about anything seen.
Thank you. Questions? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price? Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
And could I get a motion to approve the amendments to the final appropriations for the 22-23 fiscal year as presented in the agenda? These are all for federal grant allocation changes.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Dr. Pryor. Anything to add or?
Yes, there is allocation. Small increases. That's enough paperwork for my presentation board resolution. Send it to the county auditor's office.
Please call the roll.
All right, Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price? Yes. Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson? Yes. Mrs. Storm?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Anything else at this time, sir?
No.
Thank you. Correspondence. Anything for the good of the board, especially something that you think maybe not everybody else had the opportunity to see?
I received another link email, some questions and then some comments or absentee policy with respect to exams, and it was well researched, very thorough email that I honestly read it. I did not have time to get research, but that's good. But I don't know which other president received it, the comment and thoughts on a little later in the meeting. But it was a lot there.
Yeah. I received quite a number of emails and messages this week about the high school exam exemption policy and other confusing parts of the handbook. So I thought during the handbook section, we could talk about that.
Anything else? All right, then we can move into our always favorite part of the meeting, good news recognition. Move our fancy furniture here. Have a few individuals to recognize tonight. If you don't mind coming forward when I call you, congratulate you, and maybe if there's any words you want to share, appreciate hearing it. But first, for being named 2024 USA Lacrosse Academic All-American Team, Carter Colfax. Next, we would like to recognize our class of 2024 salutatorian, Justin Paul. Justin gave a great speech at graduation. As did this gentleman, our 2024 valedictorian, Lincoln Warren. Okay. So now we are at reports to the board, yes?
Yep. All right. So district goals.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt for one thing? If anybody would like to stay for the rest of the meeting, feel free, but we will not have any hard feelings. If you've got dairy shed to attend to, that's totally cool. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.
Congratulations. I know.
So so this is our district goals presentation, and so we are at the end of year one of our district goals. So I thought it would be good to give a update to the board of kind of where we're at with all of our goals and the progress we made and the things that we still have to do. We are in year one of our 3-year. Again, we instead of having maybe more of a traditional 5-year, we've got a 3-year district goals. A little bit more, probably more sense of urgency with a 3-year that we got to get things rolling. And so, so if we go to the next, I have to go up there. So these are our really 4 goals. We have 4A and 4B. So again, our first one is culture and climate. Focus 3 and artists and teachers. So a couple months ago, I know Mr. Han and Mrs. Hill presented on those and gave some updates and some more information about that. Our second goal is about systems and processes and making sure that our processes are research-based and we have successful implementation and setting ourselves up for success as we implement our various programs, initiatives, anything that is a bigger deal in the district. And so we're working on that. Facilities is our next goal. Ms. Sigmund's been leading that and will be handing over to Mr. Eckley when he takes over for Mrs. Sigmund. And so facilities, really about planning for the future, some maybe more short-term and then also long-term things. And then finances, making sure that we are being proactive with that. And Mr. Lyman will be sharing some more information about that in a minute. So with that, Mr. Han, if you want to come on up, Mr. Han's going to talk about Focus 3. And then hand it over to Mrs. Hill, and then I will take it over from Mrs. Hill.
All right, good evening. Keep this pretty quick. We just did speak about Focus 3 months ago. So this year, the goal was to kind of introduce some of the major concepts of Focus 3 to all of our students, also staff who has been trained, and then also communicate with parents. So each building introduced the concepts of do the right thing, soar together, and pursue excellence in kind of an age-appropriate way in each building. We're not doing it all the same. You know, Stephen Bell to BCI to the middle school to the high school. There's different ways of doing it. Staff and students were all surveyed at the end to kind of see how we're getting it, and as far as how effective the training was and the introduction, and it was pretty solid feedback. If you'll see that one at the bottom, that's Stephen Bell. Mrs. Franz and Spark kind of organized that one. spilling out SOAR with our students. It's kind of a little collaborative work as well. Mr. Charlesworth's classes kind of helped figure out the size of the letters, how many kids, the space, and then Rylan Carper from our drone team flew the drone to take pictures and video. Mr. Conte wanted me to mention for sure that this has gone pretty viral on his page. It's on my page, but he got 37,000 account reactions, over 1,000 shares, 44,000 plays, I believe. So it's pretty crazy. So some neat stuff there. The high school, we've been doing our videos and things like that. 10 or 12 videos at this point, and we've had 47,000 views there. So that's kids, that's community, that's parents, and then some beyond that. As far as our indicators of success, we're saying that they're partially met. The goals were students, staff, and families will find consistency between buildings and shared responsibilities for police behaviors and outcomes measured through survey data. And also that the survey would indicate more positive learning environment for everybody. So it partially met because we were not able to survey parents. We did survey staff and students, and we got good feedback there. Parents were not surveyed this year, so that's why we put partially met. But again, it's been a good start. A lot of messaging out there and teaching in all of our buildings. And again, it's different in every building. But all buildings are engaged and moving forward with this. And it's going to be a long process. A little bit each year, and it builds upon itself. And 8 years from now or 10 years from now, when these first graders in high school, we should know all this stuff drilled in their heads, and we should be able to use common language throughout the community to keep improving our culture. But overall, it's been successful, I do believe. Going forward, we're going to continue to implement Focus 3 for all students, staff, and also communication with parents as well. That's for the next several years. Ms. Sill.
Mr. Hand, real quick, your
Yes.
videos are great. I really like them.
Some people watch them, some don't.
Yeah.
I watch them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Focus 3 is one of our holdovers from our last strategic plan. We've been doing it since 2020, since during the pandemic is kind of when we, yeah.
And to roll out staff. Coach Jenkins, a nice reputation for our software testing day. Brilliant. So it's a football team, it's a huge class that we're doing this process for a while too. So they're great resources inside the building.
Well, it's trying to stick with something for a while rather than, okay, this year we're doing this, next year we're doing something different, the year after that. So.
Amazing how things work when we stick with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So the second part of our culture and climate goal, was the artisan teacher. So if you remember when I was here a few months ago to present on you, just a refresher, artisan teacher is a training that all of the administrators have gone through at different levels and over the last couple of years. So they're the 7 tools. It's all about developing teachers and teaching, which ultimately is, what's best for students and what should be driving our work as administrators. So the 23-24 focus was again on that first tool, which was the 30-second feedback. So our action steps for this year is that all of the principles were built in, trying to make sure that our staff understood kind of the goal, what's the purpose, and ultimately what is the outcome. Then August through November, principals went into each classroom for all teachers and gave that 30-second feedback so that we could model it. Then from November all the way through March, different buildings trained their staff and modeled that 30-second feedback. And then December through May, our goal was to have 100% of teachers engaged in the peer-to-peer visits. We put partially met because, things happen. We work with kids. So not everyone was able to complete that. But we were about 85%, which was very successful. And at the very least, everyone had exposure to it, learned about it, and had it modeled for them in their classrooms. And so we did also survey teachers at the end of the year. For the most part, it was met with a lot of positivity. As you heard, Mr. Bean was here, and he really, really valued it. And so that was generally considered pretty positive and had a good impact on their school year for those that were able to complete it. So then our next steps, so next year, 24-25, we're going to kind of follow the same thing, but it's the second tool, which is craft conversation. So I'm sure I'll be back next, year to give you more info on that. But just a quick little note here, that 30-second feedback is just that quick, positive, I, saw this happen when you did this. Craft conversations is a little bit longer, so it's more than that 30-second. And the difference here really is the idea of a conversation. So it's whoever's observing is asking questions, kind of trying to dig a little bit deeper and not just noticing and giving feedback, but really trying to understand, ask questions, and, kind of help whoever they're observing sort of see the sequence of events versus just giving that kind of quick feedback there. So the way it's described is that it's shop talk between two very enthusiastic people, as all of us are and our whole staff is. So that will be kind of the next steps for next year. So we'll follow the same thing. Administrators will model it. It will be taught, and then we'll give the chance for our teachers to engage in peer-to-peer. And then just as a reminder, the idea of teachers going into classrooms observing their colleagues actually came from a couple years ago panorama survey. That was a big thing across the district. Teachers said they want to get into other people's classes, so this was also kind of a way to make sure we met that goal and that ask from our staff as well.
Do they observe for the entire period or just for just a few minutes and that's it?
The goal was the entire period, but I'll be very honest, it depended on subs and the sub capacity that we had for that day. So the goal was the whole period. For the most part, we were trying to get them in there at least 15 minutes so that they could see, a part of a lesson, whether it was the intro and the hook or the delivery or, kind of the wrap up and the exit ticket and that type of thing. All right, I'll pass it on to Dr. Kuzak.
Again, the artisan teacher, we've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. That is a holdover from our last strategic plan, and it's professional development for us administrators and principals, making sure that we're keeping up on things and making sure that we're having those conversations also with staff members. So the next one is systems and processes. So some of our action steps were conducting focus groups with our administrators and other staff to ensure readiness to, again, as part of implementation science, and making sure that we're ready for this. Conducting a district capacity assessment. So this is a tool from implementation science. We worked with a group, and so this is a rubric, a tool that essentially says of all the implementation science, not all, but of implementation science items, where are we at with implementing those? And then the last action step was doing the actual research or implementation science research training for administrators and other staff that are involved in the implementation science processes. So really what we did, phase 1 training, admins and selected staff that were on the DIT. So again, when I explain some acronyms here, DIT is a district implementation team. And it's a district leadership team, essentially what it is. Was conducted with consultants from NER, National Implementation Research Network out of University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then State Support Team 10, SST 10. They work with both of those groups working with us on implementation science. So we have someone local at State Support Teams, someone local, obviously NER is not local. So the DIT, the District Implementation Team, was established, and procedures and protocols are being established. So those norms during meetings, kind of what areas work the DIT is in charge of, and then starting to use implementation science principles with selection of ELA textbooks. So the challenge with implementing this, at the same time we're trying to use this process for ELA textbook adoption, is we're still trying to figure out the whole implementation science thing while we're trying to do the ELA textbook. So we're trying to do those kind of at the same time. So, but giving something that is tangible for us to work on for implementation science rather than something theoretical and kind of abstract, that can be a little challenging. And so when you pick out a project or something, it's much more tangible to see how those things connected. And then we're establishing BITs, building implementation teams, again, building leadership teams. But the difference is these teams are helping with implementation of our procedures, our processes. our programs, and so they're just not a leadership team. They're helping to monitor and to provide feedback on how those procedures, processes, and programs are doing. So indicators of success will be implemented according to district readiness data. We met that because we actually started last June. Didn't really, it got off to a little rocky start, to be honest with you, and so we kind of paused for a little bit. We actually shifted from one organization to another organization, and then we really dug into the district readiness, and so we really didn't start our actual training, our professional development until January. So we really used that first semester to assess readiness, try to better educate people, and try to get folks more information and education about systems and processes. An increase in scores regarding the implementation of science research on our district capacity assessment. So we took that last summer, and then we took it this spring. And so there's 57 possible points. Last summer we scored a 2. And this summer, or this time, we scored 11. And so we have a lot of growth to make, but a lot of those things is just because we don't have our procedures and things in place. So we were going to do that 2 times a year. So we have a lot of opportunity for growth in those areas. So
It's like a 600% growth.
yeah, see, there you go. That's a way to look at it, growth. So hopefully, we're going to take that a couple times a year, and so we'll see a lot of growth in that.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
The capacity for
Like having all of our,
documenting and abiding by our
like having all your procedures, your processes of implementation science kind of within the district. Do you have a DIT? A district implementation team. Well, at the beginning we did not, so we scored a 0. So now we have a DIT, so we scored a point on that. But it's so yeah. So there's things like that are. Do you have
Got a
DITs?
DIT.
Do you have a building implementation team? No, we didn't, and we didn't this spring yet. We're going to. So those are things that we're going to have, and there's the protocols, there's the procedures in place for our whole process. And so that's why I have confidence we're going to score a lot higher.
like your capacity for procedural greatness.
Yeah, so do you have capacity in your district to support implementation, successful implementation is really what it's measuring. Again, it's a rubric, and it's a national rubric for National Implementation Research Network. And then successfully doing the training, so we met that. And then areas of human resources, selection, deselection of materials, which is going to be the ELA, and then MTSS, which is multi-tier systems of supports. So it's partially met because we're kind of in tandem doing human resources and the selection, deselection process. We really haven't solidified either one of those, so that's why it's partially met. Hopefully by the end of next year, we're going to have both the human resources piece and the selection, deselection covered. And so next steps are, again, we're continuing our professional development. We're going to continue to conduct our district capacity assessment twice a year, and then we're going to continue with our training with our administrators and other specified staff. So on our DIT for next year, our district implementation team, we have representation administratively and teachers from each of our buildings, and then we also have district folks on that team also, like myself and Mrs. Scan. And so there's a representation from the entire district, but the goal is to see the big picture and not be tied into your building, but also to have representation from each of the areas. And then facilities. Any questions with that?
Okay. So our task was to create a 7-year rolling facilities plan. And in order to do that, we wanted to, first of all, looking at it this way, we're going to base the priorities of the buildings. We did prioritization. We got to look at finances. We want community engagement and so on. And one of the things we were going to do is do a student projection study. But we actually had one created in 2018 that was a 10-year plan. And when we started looking at those numbers, they were actually a little higher than our actual enrollments. And so instead of spending, it was going to be very expensive to do another one. That was done with a grant the first time. This time it was not going to be. So we decided to forego the planning of student enrollment. But anyway, we did create a facilities planning committee, and that had parents, staff members from every building. We had representatives of
music, theater, athletics. Annie was on as a board member, and then community members and residents as well. We met monthly to get going, and we met and would bring in they go out and talk to survey people in their buildings and around them and bring things back, and then we prioritize them as a committee, looking at fiscally, how we're going to pay for those things, who's going to be paid for them, and prioritization of all that. And so that's how we developed our plan. The other thing we did is I had a commercial appraiser come in to evaluate Sugar Creek Elementary property, because we don't currently use that as a facility in our district, but we pay for it to be up and running. So, and then we had an outside group that you're going to hear from in a little bit. Okay, so we did come up with a plan, but there's really three pieces of this facility plan. When we start talking and gathering data, there's really three components. One is just more like things that are currently in place that might need updated. For example, the restrooms at the high school need new flooring. Or we need to paint the stage at the middle school, or paint the stage at the high school. We need more storage for this area and things like that. That's stuff that can be paid out of our district budget, out of our permanent improvement funds or general fund. So we had those things. And a lot of them for this year's plan are almost done. We're just checking them off. The other thing we have to do is we look at bigger projects that are going to take money that we may not be able to do out of permanent improvement funds. For example, maybe what would have been last year is the playground upgrade at BCI. That's being funded by community donations. No district dollars are being used. You're going to hear about the high school weight room proposal and a little bit from Coach Jenkins. This is another example that's similar to the playground proposal. But there might be other things that we look at, big thing, like maybe we want to add tennis courts and things like that are dream projects, because we are the only school district without tennis courts. I'm just going to let you know that. But that's not something we can just maybe absorb out of our general budget, so we may have to look at how those are going to be funded. And then the third component is the Sugar Creek Elementary property. I'm going to tell you right now, as a person who deals with that all the time, some big decisions need to be made with that property. Because we're not using it, we rent it, and the rent is not covering the cost that building is going to cost to this district down the road when we need to replace the roof and things like that. So we need to have a big decision made about that. But the things you have also in that, it's been in the community for 100 years, it was built ago. We have the Lions Club festival there every year. The Lions Club has property there. Is it worth value? Is it an asset to the district? Is it not an asset? So the commercial appraisal is the first piece of that. And we've been talking to the city of Bellbrook and the Lions Club and starting to look at some tentative plans for that. But before we can do anything, we're going to need community input. So that's going to be a good time to be on our little committee. So that's the time I recommend to you going out and handing it up, baton over to Ms. Dreckley. Probably ought to have a community meeting about that in 2025. That's on that plan there. Nothing needs to be done in the immediate things right now. It's rented out. We use it. We have 3 different groups that rent that facility. But 3, 4, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, that could be a very expensive asset for this district that you need to make some decisions on. So those are the 3 components. And so we're going to get the financing to be involved with that. So you can see we partially met some of the things. And the reason I said we partially met the engagement, we had people representatives, but I think we need to engage the community more, especially with the Sugar Creek Elementary. So that's why it was partially met. And then the financing, again, some of those things we can pay for, but some of these bigger projects, you're going to have to figure out how we're going to fund those. So the next steps is just as we accomplish 2024, that rolls off. Now you're going to add that 7th year. But I'll be honest, 7 years is a really long time to plan out facilities. For big projects, yes, but for the day-to-day stuff, it's going to change a lot. So we really had 4 solid years of planning, and after that, it becomes a little more general, like save money to replace the roofs and things like that. But each year, you'll tack on more of that. So that's the facilities. And that's any questions? Okay, now.
Come up.
Well, when we establish goals for finances, it's usually difficult to come up with very many because over the years and different strategic planning sessions, things like that, we come up with the same ones, make the public better aware of what's going on with district finances, establish a financial advisory committee, But this first goal I thought was pretty creative. I think Mr. Kinsey came up with this one, and that is to utilize the 5-year forecast to evaluate the future needs of the district. And we look at this forecast and we take our revenues for the past fiscal year end and in the general fund and we multiply that by 20%, whatever number we come up with there, we use that as an indicator of when we need to take some kind of action. So if our finances are dwindling, when they get down to that number, we know we need to start thinking about things that are difficult decisions, making cutbacks, sources of revenue, and things like that.
What's the state trigger for fiscal, I guess, emergency or whatever they call it?
It's they have fiscal watch, fiscal I think I forget what the other one is, fiscal advisory or something, and then fiscal emergency is the last one. I know the first one you're put in fiscal watch when on your 5-year forecast you show a negative balance 2 years in, okay, 5, and we were in that something like 2018. We were on fiscal watch, and then someone from the state comes down and monitors month to month our finances for a while. Finally, we got taken care of and get out of it.
All right, thank you.
That's a negative overall balance. That's not a negative yearly kind of thing.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So this will help us when we hit that balance. For our district, it's $7,275,000. If we hit that number for general fund balance, then we need to, have some discussions. So we've obviously, since I just named it, we have done the math and come up with what that balance is, and we're going to work with that. The second goal was to utilize the 7-year Master Facilities and Grounds Plan to provide future financial planning. We've just received that, I believe, about a week ago, so nothing's been done with that one yet. We will do that going forward, and so that one has not been accomplished at this time. And the third one, to provide comprehensive annual financial update. This is the one that's the most interesting to me, at least, because I don't know how many of you have read the spring bridge, but it was almost totally dedicated finances to meet this goal. And some of these things are interesting, I would think, to the public. I mean, we've got our district spends less than the state average per pupil in the state average district per pupil. We spend less than the districts in our 20 district demographic group that the Ohio Department of Ed puts us into per pupil. We spend less there. We have a lower tax rate than almost all the districts in our area except for the rural ones. Now, the reason that people feel like they have high taxes, though, is the value of the homes, the properties, not the tax rate itself. And when you look at an overall tax rate, we're really low. When you look at, we have no city income tax, we have no school district income tax. Many of the districts around here have school district income tax. We just have only real estate property tax. So it was interesting looking at the different comparisons, how the other districts' properties were valued, the average house values were kind of in the middle, maybe a little higher middle on average house value, but total tax burden, Bellbrook City and Sugarcreek Township are lower than the 10 districts that I have listed here in the area. So anyway, that's interesting. We had in here a listing of we talk a lot of times about unfunded or underfunded mandates that the state and federal government place upon us. You need to do this program or take this action, and we are either going to partially fund it or not fund it at all, but we're requiring you to do that. And we have one of those big ones coming up next year. We'll let somebody else talk about that one. And then the flaws in the state funding that really hits a district like ours. I've talked about it a million times, but if you have high property values and high average income for residents, state drastically cuts your funding. And so you have to rely, for a district like us, you pretty much rely on real estate taxes, the levy, or cutbacks in expenses. Those are, what else are you going to do? You talk about new sources of income. A school district has so many restrictions on what we can do. There aren't any. A bake sale isn't going to get it, so to speak. So we want to. One of the big goals is to just going forward go as far as we can before we have to, come back to the public again for any requests, and we feel like we're going to be able to do that for quite a while.
I thought that bridge was so well put together. It just laid it out there very simplistically, and yet stark. This is reality. It's not hyperbole. It's not, it's not debatable. Those are, empirical facts that are in there. I really found that quite valuable. Is the bridge, is it persistently on our website, or is it just, this is so people can go find that? Highly recommend. It's, anybody can understand it. Really nice. I know, Kevin, you were really involved in putting that together, and I'm really appreciative of that because,
Henry did a good job with it too.
yeah, all of you, whoever I know, but yeah, it was laid out in such a way that it's very understandable and it's very insightful. So
And I think I heard a lot of feedback that people felt like their efforts to pay property taxes were appreciated. So they really appreciated that they were being recognized like, hey, we do pay property taxes. Thank you for everything you do. So I heard from a lot of people that appreciated that tone that was there.
And then the last goal here was to create a financial advisory committee to meet twice a year. This is a requirement of the state auditor's office that we have the committee and has to meet at least once. We have met this goal. We met twice. The first meeting was very well attended and very vigorous, might be a good word. And the last one though, we were right in the middle of vacation season, so we didn't have very good attendance at that one, but still we had some good riveting discussion about as much as you can get on things like audits, the 5-year forecast. We reviewed the bridge, and we discussed some of these district goals at that meeting. So, any questions about that?
Great job.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, just finish up the district goals here. So we're going to get together and in the next steps, make sure that we have good action steps, good things for next school year, ready to roll and continue on in year 2. We're almost over a third way through our district goals already. So kind of our next steps, and then hit the ground running for next school year. We have
Sigmund and or Mr. Jenkins, Coach Jenkins, for the next presentation.
But one, I appreciate come up here and speak on a great need that we have at the high school training facility.
I don't know if you've ever stepped into our current weight room, but it was really great 30 years ago. We were really excited when I was a youngster when that first came in, but that time is coming past, and we are very, very much in need of a bigger facility, a more up-to-date facility, a safer facility. We've been very blessed to have athletes who are insanely committed at what they do. We are constantly winning the all sports trophy for sports across the board. And I think it's time for us to allow our athletes to maximize their potential with a better training facility. Right now we are completely overcrowded. I'll have up to 70 plus football players in there at a time. We'll have at least 12 to 24 guys who have to go outside of the weight room just to train because we are literally on top of each other. I have some coaches in the room who can attest to that as well. So it's a good problem. We currently have every single athletic team is using that weight room, which is a really good thing. The athletic department really hit that hard a few years back, and every single athletic team is using that facility, but the facility is just outdated. It's filled with metal plates, dumbbells that are deteriorating and falling apart, vinyl parts of equipment that are ripped apart. It really is time. It does not meet the purple and gold standard, and we would love to privately fund this. So we have put a committee together, and I'm just going to give you a little bit here, so we're not here for 2 hours, but I could talk to you all night long if you'd like to, because I'm very passionate about this. Not only do our athletes use this, but we usually have at least 5 classes per semester that are using the weight room. Myself and Mrs. Rose both have weightlifting classes. I'll have up to 2 to 3 per semester. Our phys ed classes will use them. My speed and agility class will use them. So it's a room that may be used more than any other room in the high school. And I probably spend more time in that room than anybody else at the high school. And it's just a much needed improvement for Bellbrook standards. Where we would like to put it, sorry, I got like a good round. It's right here in front of the athletic entrance here. There's a nice area of grass there where it would fit absolutely perfect. And we've done the measurements. We're looking at a facility that would be about 80 by 100. But that's where we'd like to put it, right in front of the athletic entrance. Would not need any sort of plumbing or water connected to this facility because it would be right next to the high school, obviously, next to the locker rooms, next to bathrooms, whatever they would need in that regard. It would need HVAC, but it would look something similar to this. Wood frame building wrapped in brick to match the brick that we currently have. This is what the current, our future weight room would, what we would like to look like. Most newer weight rooms have added turf to their facility to work on speed, agility, plyometrics, all sorts of different things. I know Fairborn is putting in a new facility as we speak. And many area schools have gone down this route, and this really is the way to do it because speed training is a crucial part of athletic training here. This year, this is a total of 16 racks for pretty much every exercise. Your typical athlete can perform almost all of those exercises if they need to within one of these racks. Right now, we have a total of 12 racks, so we kind of have to rotate through. We have some equipment that we would be able to transfer over into the new facility, but our plan would pretty much be sell what we have, all right, and put that money towards the new equipment that would go in there. And we have estimates on all of those. But this is the purple and gold standard. This is, and if I encourage you to look at other high schools similar to us and their athletic training facilities and what they look like, and then compare them to what we are currently training in. So a more customized look if we wanted to go in that direction, not necessary. So the total cost would be about 1.25 billion, and then we've met with all representatives on the building costs, the equipment costs, the floor, turf, carpet, coverages, bills, lighting, heating, things like that. So if you do compare this to other schools who have funded for a new athletic facility, this is a very low number in comparison. I believe Centerville tried something upwards towards 9 million. That was too high of a number. They did not reach that goal, but this is a goal that we absolutely can accomplish this from a privately funded standpoint. So how does our current facility compare to similar schools? It's small, it's outdated. Like I said in the beginning, the equipment is literally falling apart. We have so many athletes that want to train. We needed to give them the best opportunity to train in a safe and effective environment. Who will have access to the new facility? Basically every Bellbrook High School student, probably the staff as well, I would imagine, and middle school students as well and staff. Who will pay for the new facility? Plan is that this will be 100% privately funded. And we've spoken with many individuals throughout the community. We put together a great committee of committed people who are willing, to put forth some money towards this and create events to kind of raise the money that we need. And again, in comparison to what other districts are doing and accomplishing, I know here at Bellbrook that we can raise 1.25 million. Yes.
Not to be at all negative here, but I was surprised that we had we have confidence that you can raise the money here locally at that level, because I know there's been quite an effort that's gone into Eagle Land over here, and I think it's what, $300,000 or $400,000, is that correct? And so if you could you elaborate a little bit on how you're confident that you can actually?
Well, there are so many athletes, and like I said, athletes who really take what they do very, very seriously, who would benefit from this. So many young kids who are coming up, and that's where I've had a lot of my contacts and people who wanted to be a part of this committee, people with young families, with lacrosse players and girls basketball players and baseball players and football, and the list goes on and on and on, and swimming, who would love to see this happen, who want to see this happen, who want to be a part of this happening. Um, really, we tried to kind of get this ball rolling almost 10 years ago, and there was some conflicts with the levy going on and things like that. I believe it was a renewal levy at the time, so we kind of sidelined it. But now it really is to the point where, um, at Bellbrook, we have very high standards in all that we do, and we should keep our high standards with athletics as well. And I think our athletics, our programs are surging right now. I think we're really on the brink of taking it to the next level, and really it's the training that would allow that.
I mean, to me, it seems like your plan is really sound there. It's like you're going to start planning, obviously, and then, and then form this committee and then start raising money, but not commit to, construction until you've got, a substantial
here.
portion of that,
Yep. So once we have 900,000 raised, that's when we would like to start the construction.
Right.
If I can interject real quick, we're not gonna take money, we're just getting money pledged. We don't wanna collect 400,000 and not be able to like now we would, keep it, so we're gonna get commitments for the money, and once they reach that commitment, then proceed. Then we'll take it.
But like I said, many people in the community want to see this happen. Many parents who have walked into that weight room of some of my football players were kind of shocked to see what we currently use. If you have any further questions, most of you know how to find me. Mr. Odell is also a large part of this committee, but Greg Roberto is our committee chairman, and with any of the financing questions that you may have, he's the person to contact.
Coach, I have a question.
Yes.
Just out of pure curiosity.
Yes.
Maybe I should ask you later. Do you know, have you picked a manufacturer for like the racks and stuff yet, or?
Right.
Nice. Okay. So supporting an Ohio company right up the road. Very nice.
Yes. That's who gave us the quote for 80,000.
And real quick, a big facility out there for the teacher right now, turf on the football fields out in the process.
Yeah.
The track's not down yet, but I went out and looked at the field yesterday and oh wow, how bad our turf was. It's so bright and green and the infields bright purple.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was kind of an outshoot of the facilities committee, but also to get this information in front of the board, to see if there was any questions or concerns, just to before we start moving forward on it. And so that's kind of why they've been waiting for a while here and just trying to see if are any questions or concerns.
Well, my boys are both obsessed with weightlifting, so I think they would approve.
Again, it's for all of our athletes, and all of our athletes really take their training very
Yes.
seriously, and just not only high school, middle school also. I think it would be used, I don't say 24/7, but it would be used, early in the morning till late at night, get it introduced out.
Anything else?
Nope, I don't think so.
All right.
Thank you.
Are we to our open communication period then?
Yes.
Find the right spot. All right. Your thoughts and comments are very welcome during this time. When you're given the floor, please share your name, address, and any group affiliation you hold if it's relevant to your comments. You'll then have 5 minutes for your comments, which should be directed toward the presiding officer, who tonight happens to be me. Thank you. This time is for the board to listen and absorb, and as such, traditionally, a dialogue is not created in this moment. In case you're wondering, the reason for these policies, which can be read in their entirety on the district's website in policy number 169.91, is to ensure that as many people as possible have the opportunity to speak and that everyone is treated equally and fairly. So we would like to welcome Mike Bruggeman. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello? Yeah, I haven't been here in several months. I know you guys
We missed you.
have been waiting for the token parent to speak. Thanks. Yeah, I just had a few comments. One, so I've been very busy with other things, but the transparency of the new school board website is really appreciated. I was able to uh, catch up and see what was going on here, seeing all the documents listed. It was a tremendous benefit, and it really shows how much work has to go on behind the scenes just to run the school district. Seeing all the details there, so that's much appreciated. Uh, Also, I saw on the agenda for tonight, I guess it'll be later today, about the cell phone policies. I know I've brought that up here in previous discussions with various cultural issues, but it was good to see. If the policy is the way I read it, I think it's a good path forward. I have one son in high school and one in middle school, and they both don't have cell phones, but just seeing how the kids interact with them. Uh, One parent hosted a sixth grade after end of school year party at their place, and just seeing all the kids running around with their cell phones, it was a little shocking to me as usual. But um, on I was reading the news earlier today, and I saw a school district has banned a book about banning books. I clicked on it thinking, please don't be Bellbrook. So it was not good. It was in Florida, but uh, I was happy to see that the AP biology book was approved uh, last board meeting. So it's good. I hope that we're able to continue to move forward past some of these issues like that. Our kids, I think, are pretty successful in acquiring all the information that they get from the school, and we have great discussions at home about that. Then one last thing is the facilities. I saw that as well, looking through the website a couple hours ago. I know I've brought this up a few times, and I guess I've never followed up, so I don't really know what the results are. But anytime we talk about facilities, I'm still, I would say, COVID cautious, but we see, there's an uptick coming for this next variant here shortly. The last three people I've known that have gone to Europe have spent part of their vacation sick, with the infectious summer flu. But filtration in the classrooms, airflow in the classrooms, that continues to be something. I don't know if, does every class have a HEPA filter? You can get those for maybe $150, $100 for a HEPA filter, maybe a $50 new filter a year or something. Uh, just keeping our kids healthy in the classroom, I think uh, I suspect, and I'm on YouTube, so you'll see this, but 20 years from now, I suspect that continued COVID reinfections is going to be one of those things where we say, we really did that. We really had leaded gasoline. We really did those kind of things. I think that's going to be the same thing with, everybody coughing all the time and these sorts of things. Another headline I just saw was uh, the instance of rare cancers in young and middle-aged people has increased fourfold in the last 4 years. Scientists wonder why. Hmm. You know, I, I suspect it's because of COVID, but I'm not a biologist. And then finally, congratulations on passing the new contract with the teachers. As you may know, my son is my older son has been advanced 2 grades. He's fairly advanced. He's a freshman this year. He just completed his first year of high school very successfully. He's very happy. Seems like he's excelling. He just took the SAT. He's a 13-year-old, just took it a couple months ago. He scored a perfect on the math part, almost perfect on the other part. So it's been a great benefit to the school district, the teachers, the administrators. I see all the principals here. We've met before and after school years and during the school years about him, and he continues to thrive. So I think we're definitely doing something right here. I've sent personal thank yous to some of the teachers that have been involved in his education, but I wanted to just share that in this forum where I have everybody available. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. All right, that's the end of our list, so I will now close public comment time. And we're into the superintendent's report.
Yeah, we're in the actually teacher rehire.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay,
So,
please. Okay.
So
So pursuant to Arts Revised Code 3307.353, there's a public hearing to consider rehire of Ohio STRS retirees Patty Olagas as fourth grade teacher at Bellbrook Intermediate, and Barbara Seiler as music teacher at Bellbrook Middle and High School, effective the 2020-25 school year. So this is an opportunity if there's anybody public that wants to comment on that. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Public is happy.
we're gonna vote for that tonight. That is just the public hearing part. They'll be on an agenda at a future meeting. Very good. Now it's report. So superintendent's report, new business, certificated licensed employment, resignation, leave of absence, supplemental duty. This will be a consent agenda of A, B, and C. So we still have. Actually, I'll we do first and second, then I'll do it.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion for tonight's consent agenda? It's A, B, and C. So basically all the way to number 8. I got like 4 or 5 pages here, but everything in 7, ending right before 8.
B, support staff employment, resignation, leave of absence, and administrative employment, resignation, leave of absence.
Okay. Move.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson. Okay, thank you.
So we have very supplemental contracts in here. We have resignations to those folks, and then appointment contracts for our new staff to continue to hire really quality people. And then I know in just a second we can do some introductions. And what else here? So again, this is the time you'll see a lot of supplementals here that we're doing next year. That's why there's these folks that are on here. And then same thing with support staff with summer management program. Again, do appointment for special needs assistants. And then we also have administrative contract for school site, contract amendments for a couple of our central office folks, and then also central office salary schedules move from getting the teachers and support staff solidify their contract. Traditional then to move to central office and then also administration.
Any questions? All right, can you please call the roll on tonight's consent agenda?
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey.
Yes. Motion passes.
And that
Okay.
was for all of 7.
Actually, there's only 7A, B, and C, so that was my mistake. There is a 7D. It was hiding at the bottom, so another.
Where's that?
So substitutes staff employment. 7D.
That's what you get for printing it out.
It was on ours.
I gotta find it.
This is summer support staff and substitute staff for next
All right, got it.
7D. All right, I've got 2 bullet.
Okay,
So
I'd like,
moved.
thank you. Mrs. Dorn's going to move that we accept 7D. I will second 7D. Make it all official. Please call the roll.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Thank you. Okay, so next is recommending approval of the district administrative salary schedules effective July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. I make that motion.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Anderson. As we all know, we did teacher contracts, there was class contracts, now this is administrative contracts. So questions, conversation. Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor.
Yes.
Okay, next is recommend entering into a contract with K-12 Business Consulting for the 2024 Treasurer Search. I make that motion.
Second.
And seconded by Dr. Pryor. Questions, comments?
None other than it makes me sad.
Yep.
Yep. Very much so.
In case you don't know, Kevin's retiring. We have to hire another treasurer. We don't And we know how to do that. And this consulting company is going to help us find a really good one.
which we all met with Penny earlier
Find a
this
Kevin
week.
2.0.
Thank you.
And she's very much on board with. It's our desire that hopefully there can be tons of input from administrators, but very much so from your staff. So appreciate them being willing to be involved and big part of the process. So.
And that was the purpose of our executive session this week, was that very thing.
All right, I moved it and it was seconded by Dr. Pryor. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price, Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go back a second because as I was fumbling over 7D there, I forgot to have some introduction or have our administrators introduce our new staff that are present tonight. So we're going to go back to that. The scheme does not have anybody tonight, another day. Mr. Phelps. Yes, apologize for that.
Actually, normally I ad lib to make so much cut, but we've had so much hiring this year at DCI and the district as a whole. So I've got some notes, although they all really stick out in my mind. We've got some great people joining our staff family, so we're very excited about that. As Dr. Kozad mentioned, we're working on some implementation science things, which include human resources. So we have kind of upped our game a little bit this year as a district and developed some new protocols. Mrs. Keaton and I, it's not a common line in this bill. We share candidates and multiple pools, so it's really important, just like it's important for our students to have similar experiences, no matter which classroom they're sitting in under the same course. It's also important that our candidates have that purple and gold standard when they come and interview with us. So we're working on it. We've made some big strides, but I do think it's had a great impact on the caliber of people that are crossing the finish line with all of you and getting approved throughout this season. Because as you know, it's a seasonal thing for the school districts with all of our hiring. So very pleased to introduce to you guys this -1. We're going to give her a bye because she's moving from Nashville. She's leaving Music City to come back home. She's an Oakwood grad. We're kind of pretend like that's not a big deal. But a graduate of the Ohio State University. Very happy. Former student of Mrs. Hills when she was teaching at Oakwood. So we're happy to have Sarah Baker as an IS for fourth graders. And she's going to be bringing a lot of expertise to us. The fact that she was able to interview via Google Meet and during a big drill or evacuation or something, she didn't evacuate. I know that. I just felt the sirens. She did not miss a beat. I was like, well, if you can handle that, for sure. Also in the same line of intervention, we've got Mrs. Krista Gaines joining us. So many of you may know her. Very rooted here in Bellbrook. She's coming to us from the Warren County Education Service Center, where she has been a transition coordinator. So as you know, maybe you don't, but the whole point of IEPs is to eventually not need an individualized education plan. It's to eventually have one. So transition coordinators are really a big part of that, whether it's transitioning from K-12 to college, career, whatever, or transitioning buildings or transitioning throughout their plan as they grow and build those deficits. So in addition to that, she's a proud mom of twins who recently graduated. So we're very happy to have her joining our staff. Also like to introduce Miss Logan Kissel. She was a double header interview. We actually had our first round and final round all on the same day. So anybody that has that kind of stamina, we went on that Bellbrook. So recent Wright State grad. She's a reading enthusiast, which is great because we have an ELA need, and we're implementing new language arts curriculum this year following the state legislation. So that's exciting. She also has a penchant for pastries. So we're currently working at that's the one thing everybody needs to be diversified. I don't remember where I was. So I kept aging myself, I keep forgetting. I think that I'm still 22, and they're 22, and I'm, getting older as time goes on. And it's like, oh, this is what LA has the buttercream icing from Woody's. Woody's. All the empty, all over. Yeah, that's what it is. So Also, I'd like to introduce Miss Ashley Steele. She's going to be teaching science and social studies for us in fifth grade. We had several retirements. We're not just running people off. With several retirements with the change with STRS for the 34 years. So we're going to miss those folks. They're hard to replace, but we've got several people coming in. So Ashley's one of them. She's coming to us from Springfield most recently. Again, we're like bringing in all these great character traits for people because she was teaching fourth grade at the beginning of last school year, and by the end of the year, she was teaching kindergarten, mostly populated by English language learners. So I'm like, if you can make that flip and do that successfully, yes, we want you at Bell Creek. So prior to that, though, Colorado, right? Colorado, University of Colorado Springs, graduate, and taught at a project-based learning school, which has been a long-standing, ongoing role that we've been doing at Bellbrook years ago before the pandemic. Lots of us did that training from the PBL Institute, and that's really, just getting to that real-world application and the personalized learning, which that's what our kids need. It's very rigorous, very personalized. So very excited about that, and I'm so glad you were here at the night of the presentation for the new training facility because she's a power looker. So she did not want our help, but they did a lecture. Very much enjoyed that presentation. So but yeah, this will be currently we're up to a total of 9 new staff members, including a school nurse with the retirements. So we're gonna miss those retirees, but we're gonna be able to bring in a lot of talent. So it's gonna be a great new year. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
My new hire is not here, but I just wanted to take a moment to wish Shelby Hurley, or Shelby Sigmund, the best of luck. One of the joys and sorrows of being a principal is watching your teachers grow in leadership and then leaving for administration. So it's kind of a joy for me because my husband teaches at Waynesville, which is where Shelby is going to be their new assistant principal in the 612 building under Chip Will, also a former Bellbrook teacher. And so we wanted to wish her well, and we were able to find an excellent, not replacement for her, because no one will replace Shelby, but another excellent teacher who will be joining us from Tip City, Carl Senior. So best of luck to Shelby. We're gonna really miss her, but we know she's gonna do great things at least.
My daughter's real fat. She's her cross country coach, but we understand.
And news traveled very fast because I knew about it and I was like, no, she's not. And I was like, oh, I guess she is.
It's the irony. Chip Will's dad was principal and I was assistant principal. And now she's principal.
That's awesome.
Oh, great.
That's great.
Henry, there's a good article for you. I guess maybe more for Waynesville though. Sorry, never mind.
Just train, you don't have anybody, dude. I'm gonna grab this other mic. My mic keeps on turning off. Great. Again, welcome to all of our new hires. Happy to have you here. We're gonna move on to out-of-state travel for boys basketball. So recommend approval for out-of-state travel for high school boys basketball to Louisville, Kentucky, June 21st, 22nd, 2024. Participate in the Kentucky Association of Basketball Coaches Titans Shootout Tournament, no cost to the district.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Anderson and Dr. Pryor. Let's call the roll.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn.
Yes.
All right. Recommend approval of a 10-year agreement with Pepsi Corporation to provide district-wide beverages services for the period of July 2024 through June 30th, 2034.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Dr. Pryor.
Again, we've had Pepsi for quite a long. We have a good relationship with them. Things are going well, and so we just don't see any reason to change. And they have my favorite drink of a Diet Mountain Dew, so that was so. That did not had no bearing on the decision, but we're very happy with them. Very happy.
Is it usually a 10-year contract?
It is not usually a 10-year contract.
What's it been in the past? Just curious.
Last time it was a 5-year contract. I'm not quite sure before that. Ms. Sigmund, do you happen to know?
I think it used to be 10-year contract.
It used to be 10-year contracts. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Money, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Let me just ask, most, like, they're not selling pop at Stephen Bell, is this correct? We're talking about like
Correct.
the stadium, okay.
Correct.
Just.
Yeah, any other kind of
Sounds
drinks would have to, during the school day, would have to meet our nutritional
Okay.
requirements. And they do work with Sodexo or food service
Okay.
to provide items. But
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Or games.
Yeah,
It's for the
Yeah.
teachers who
okay.
need the
right,
caffeine.
oh, I'm fine with that.
By the time they get one, it's so outdated. Hardly anybody buys one to go.
Yeah.
We drink a lot of water.
Please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yeah.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey.
Yes.
Next is recommend passage of resolution granting supplemental duty pupil activity experience steps for employees of the Greene County Career Center and Greene County Educational Service Center effective with the 2024 school year.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson.
Again, the full resolution is in the on board docs. So essentially, what this allows is those staff, those members that work in our school district over 75% of the time, but are actually employees of the Career Center or employees of the Educational Service Center, for them to get steps for supplementals if they are coaching or they're with a club, for them to get steps, because anybody that is not within our district, they don't get those steps. So we actually had a couple people that have been coaching for quite a long time, and then since we had this partnership with the Career Center that actually saved the school district a lot of money, that person actually went back quite a few steps, and it's really hard to find coaches. It's really hard to find people doing clubs. So we thought this would be a good way to kind of recognize that and have good people that are in our school anyways every day. No one really would know that they're working at the Career Center. They're employed by the Career Center or the Educational Service Center.
Questions? Okay, that was moved by Mrs. Dorn and seconded by Mrs. Anderson. Please call the roll.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
All right, next is F, substitute rate of pay for 2024-2025. Request approval of the substitute staff rate of pay beginning with the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Pryor and then Mrs. Dorn.
And so the teacher nurse pay rate stayed the same, but we did increase the other rates as those folks mostly are SLAS positions. So they received some raises. So we increased some of our substitute pay rates. And then we also, as again, to note that it's really difficult, it can be challenging to find long-term substitute teachers. And so in the past, they've had to wait until day 61 of being in the same job to get an increase in pay. So we recognize that they're they're doing more work than just a daily sub, and so we are increasing them after day 16 up until day 60. They're going up to $200 for that time period, to recognize that, yeah, you're doing a little extra work because you are taking over that person's class. So those two are really the changes on the substitute rate of pay.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor.
Yes.
Okay. Next is district handbooks. To recommend approval of revisions to student parent handbooks grades K to 12 for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Dorn. Is there a second? I will second that.
Well, I have some comments about it. I've heard from a lot of parents this week about one, particular issue. In the, well, actually, there's some discrepancies in the attendance policies in all the handbooks. But the issue that parents notice the most is the high school exam exemption policy. So in case you don't know this, high school students take exams after, the first semester in the December and after the second semester in the spring. And we have a great policy that encourages students to do well, where if you have all A's or if you have A's, a student can exempt one exam. That means they get to pick an exam where in a class they have an A in, and they don't have to take it. And that's a huge deal to our students. They look forward to that. They just count on that. It helps them try their best. And so that is a wonderful, wonderful policy. But a lot of times it happens that, a student gets doesn't get the exemption because they miss too many days of school. And parents and students don't understand, like, all my absence was excused. How did this happen? And so that, then poor Mr. Hand has to get all these emails and complaints from parents trying to understand what happened. So I think I can see some of the confusion in the handbook. Let's see. So it says students can lose their privilege of exam exemptions under the following conditions. One is that they receive detentions and suspensions, which is good. We want our students to be, do very well academically and be good humans. And another is they've reached the threshold of excessively absent, and so, or habitually truant. So most people read that and say, well, that's not my kid. They only have excused absences, for legitimate reasons. But if you look on the handbook on the definition of excessively absent, let's see, I printed it out. Where did it go? It says, excessive absence, the definition in the handbook is 38 or more hours of school in 1 month with or without a legitimate excuse, and 65 or more hours in 1 school year with or without a legitimate excuse. So 65 hours per year divided by 7 hours a day, that's like missing more than 9 days of school. And that's with or without a legitimate excuse. So, a kid could get unlucky and have COVID in the fall and the flu in the spring and miss that many days. And even though they made up all their work and still got an A, they don't get their exam exemption. And they're very upset about that. And I understand. I mean, I feel like it's a kid who has a hard time and works that hard and still gets an A. I feel like it's punishing them to deny them that exam exemption. So, another problem, so that's just a big deal. I've heard from parents, my kid, she was unlucky. She had the flu and COVID and a concussion and had a 4.0 and didn't get to exempt her exams because she missed too many days. So, that's something that either, I don't think there should be an attendance requirement to exempt the exam. If whatever happened to you, that you made it all up and still got an A, I wouldn't take that away from you. I'm perfectly happy with you can't have gotten detentions and suspensions. That's certainly important. But, and another problem with all the handbooks is this definition of excessive absence here. In our handbooks, it says with or without a legitimate excuse. But if you look at board policy 5200, it says medically excused absences do not count as excessive absences. So that's in board policy, but that's not in the handbook.
Right.
So maybe it should be. I mean, I'm assuming the board policy the handbook should be reflective of the board policy, and that isn't. So also, Ohio Revised Code 3321.191 says that medically excused absences do not count as excessive absences. So I think perhaps
they go on to
something's
define
missing
those as well.
there, and that might need clarified or explained a little bit, that excessive absence policy. Also, let's see, are in all the handbooks, it says what a medically excused absence is. And it's basically a doctor or dental appointment, you have a doctor's note. Whether you're sick, it's a doctor's note. So a medically excused absence has a doctor's note. However, according to our board policy 5200, it says each student can have 10 medically excused absences per year without a doctor's note and just a call from the parent. So that's a big difference, a big discrepancy there. So it says after that, you need a doctor's note, after those 10. So that's something that's just confusing to parents, and especially when it comes to the exam exemption. How could my kid have, been excessively absent? So I just think since that definition of, the excessive absences seems to conflict with our board policy and all the handbooks, perhaps they need looked at again just to double check that everything is in line with board policy and the law, and maybe vote on them at another meeting.
Right, yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think we should table just until we can further flesh this out, because the state 3321.191 lists what the medical excuses are: personal illness, illness in the family necessitating the presence of a child, quarantine. It goes through all of those. And then like in our handbook under the exam exemption, like if they want to have that attendance thing, that's not, I don't feel like that's our place to, if he's worked that out with his staff and that's what he and his staff want, then I'm okay with that. But I think it should be defined, because it does say by state definitions. And so if we could just stick what that state definition is in there, maybe it would help parents not have to call him as much.
Yeah.
But the Ohio Revised Code does list all of the medically excused things, and it says it does not count toward their 65 hours. So I just think there's a little bit of confusion there that could create some headaches for people.
I think the exam just highlighted bigger issue here.
Yeah.
I'll turn my mic on my battery dead. So I just think the exam situation just highlighted this discrepancy that people have dug into, as you did, and really dug into. There are some disparities here that I think it would do a service. I don't see particular urgency, because Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but any particular urgency of it being approved tonight for the handbooks. Can we just sit on this and not sit on it? Go back and do the research to get a consistency across the handbooks, look at our policy, also make sure that's consistent with state law. But how do you think you're saying it is? It's just that the handbooks are not in some cases.
Right, and the state, the actual Ohio Revised Code lists of medical excuses, and ours doesn't.
So does our board policy.
Goes that far, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two separate things going on. There's the absence and mentally excused pieces, and so I can definitely go back and take a look and make sure board policy and our handbooks align, and make sure they're all the same. That's separate than the exam exemption conversation. So I can definitely go back and check on, because again, the 65 hours does not include medically excused absence. So a doctor's appointment, if I have a doctor's note, that does not go into the 65 hours. And so if that's unclear in certain places in our policy or in our handbooks, I can go back and make sure that those are crystal clear in that.
And
But
so if
yeah.
if you guys want to keep the policy for exams, I think it should be defined right there, like what the state says is habitually excessively absent. Because it says by state definitions, but then you have to go to another document to figure out what that is. If we just stick it right in there, I think it's gonna be clear.
If I'm in the handbook, on page 18, so on page 10, it goes over the 65-hour policy, and that it says excluding medically excused absences. And so the 65-hour policy is in there. And then on page 18 of the exam piece, it says a student that they lose their privilege. And again, the word is privilege. It's not right, it's privilege. Right. A student has reached the threshold of excessively absent. And so that is, in that 65-hour policy, it uses the term,
it says by state definitions. It's on the bottom of 18. A student has reached the threshold of excessively absent or habitually truant by state definitions.
Right, and so that's 65 hours.
But that doesn't include all those medical reasons as the state says. Because then you get into another document on the due website that says with or without excuse. I mean, I think this is a convoluted mud by the state, not necessarily us.
Well, again, at one point they switched it, and
Right.
so the medically excused, the doctor's notes did not. It was included in those 65 hours, so they pushed that out of there, and so
So our board
I can go back
policy,
and check into it.
like board policy 5200 is incredibly clear.
Yeah.
Like with pretty much the rest of the handbooks summarize board policy, and they often don't put every single detail and exception and caveat in, because otherwise we would just say, here, read the board policy, families. Like, that is a pain. Now, whether or not this one was summarized the best way, I don't know, but I also do know that as a high school parent, the high school is pumping out this information in other ways other than just this handbook, number one. So if I also know that they're already asking families to go in and sign final forms. One of the final forms that we're already asking families to sign is acknowledge that you read the handbook. So I look to you, Dr. Kozak, and to administrators as, are there secondary implications of us tabling this until like the 28th for those kind of things where families are already being asked to sign forms and whatnot?
Well, that's been going on since, I mean, my kids signed them a couple weeks ago. So we're still asking them to sign them before we've ever approved them anyway. So I don't know if 2 weeks would, just to make sure we're getting this right.
But let me say, if there's something critical like that you need, parents are supposed to just automatically know to go read a board policy, it better say, see board policy 5200 for more details about this.
All I'm saying is that the handbook summarizes things when you're getting into exceptions and details. You go look at the larger board policy, and if there's even things there, you go and look at larger the law.
But this whole
For
exam
anybody
section
who's-
doesn't.
Because you were bringing up people who had COVID and didn't get to exempt their whatnot. But for anybody who's listening, the things that don't count, like this is your kid's absence, and these things are not going to keep them from exempting exams. Personal illness in the family necessitating presence of the child, quarantine at home, healthcare provider appointments, medically necessary leave for a pregnant student, death in the family, other circumstances that Dr. Kozad determines are valid. All of those things. And then they can miss 9 other days. If we're having a conversation about the exam exemption thing, like, I think this is super, like, if you miss 9 other days in addition to all of that, like, this is an incentive. We're trying to incentivize families to take vacations during school breaks and keep their kids in our classrooms as much as possible, because we value that. Otherwise we'd send them to online schools. I think that's incredibly generous. And if you're missing 9 days in addition to all of those things,
so
I have no issue with a student just meeting the normal standard of taking their exam. That is the normal expected.
Well, that is much more generous than what is actually written in the policy and the policy last year. This exam policy does not reference the 65-hour policy. It just says excessively absent. And our definition of excessively absent says with or without an excuse. So right now, the policy doesn't say what you just.
Our board policy does, which rules. That's
exactly, and that's all I'm saying.
I believe what Mr. Han is abiding by. I don't think if someone is surprised, they're going to be surprised in the positive. Currently, they are going to think that they weren't going to get to exam and then get to exempt because the actual policy and board policy and that Mr. Han is implementing is more gracious and lenient than what is in that.
And I think that
and I know he wants to speak.
And he and his staff have already made it. It was 2 or 3, wasn't it?
98%.
Yeah, and then you switched it. Right, and then you made the grace period for 9 days. Yeah, 10 days. I think
Plus
that.
any doctors, there's kids.
Yeah. Right. And I am sure if there's a one-off situation, Mr. Han's going to side with whatever is best for that student. But my only request is that we add whatever that number is, just for your benefit, just stick it there if we can.
Well,
Well,
but
if I
the, but
may,
the,
if
but
I,
the, but the, it's hours, it's not days,
Well, right now it says by state definitions, which is kind of like,
Which is state standard.
which is excessively absent, which is the 65 hours.
like, with or without.
the state of Ohio.
Right.
Yeah.
State of Ohio.
It's from state. All
It's
the-
awkward.
Right.
The hours turn. And the reason why the hours, while that may be hard for people to conceptualize, is they're used to count days. School. The reason why that's so important, especially all students, I'm sure, but I notice it with our littler learners, that if they have habitual tardiness and they're always late to school and they're always missing, say, their math block or their ELA block, right, that turns into days, their achievement will be lopsided. They will achieve higher in the subjects they have the afternoon to the present for versus the ones where they are tardy all the time. So that is one of the requirements. So
We're also rated on your report card for attendance.
and we should be slow at that. It's our visual, but it's very low compared to other districts.
For sure.
We did have 80% of the students that requirement. So very few people did not.
I think
In
my,
addition to the handbook, we have a really nice flow chart that we've shared with parents.
That was awesome. I thought.
And it explains it very nicely. Mr. Klein created this for his building. I loved it. I said, Mr. Klein, may I have this for Stephen Bell? I'm sure 6 through 12 has something equally as nice. We share it often with parents.
It maybe would be helpful if we put the equivalent of the hours to days, because most people probably don't know off the top of their head that the typical student day is 6.5 hours. So 65, that's 10 days.
So my primary comment for any decisions are made is that it sounds like we're talking about maybe multiple things. I've heard 3 or 4 now. For me personally, I don't feel it's totally appropriate for a school board to be trying to rewrite a handbook up here and inserting verbiage or asking verbiage to be taken out. That's just my own personal 2 cents. But, you know, certainly comments, if the board feels as a whole, well, does handbook properly reflect board policy? Well, that's probably more in the purview, and that's something that we can be talking about. I just wanted to throw that out there, as you know, take it or leave it, but I don't think we should be standing up here and just talking specifics and making very specific suggestions in this way.
And to go on with it, so there's that piece of, are things clear enough in there, and then in a separate thing is the exam exemption. So there's two different pieces, even though they're kind of tied together, but it's the attendance piece, and then it's the exam exemption piece.
Well, to me, if the, definition of excessive absence, is changed to include medically excused absences, and that's what's referenced over here in the exam exemption, excessively absent, like, that now includes medically excused absences, then that gives people, more days they're able to miss and still get that exam exemption, which would help people understand more what's going on. So I do think just, fixing that section to make sure it matches board policy and Ohio revised code would, filter through to adjusting the other things that people are concerned about.
Well, clearly something here has triggered an extensive discussion, right? So whatever that is, let's fix it, which I think is largely just the worded, not us fix it here, but allow our administrators and such to go take a look at that and just make it consistent with the board policy, with state law. Because right now it seems like it's perhaps not. And I haven't done it the justice with research that you have and some of the parents in the community have. I just think that's the key point here. I mean, that's where we really have issues. I don't want to vote to approve something that is at least offensively confusing, at least for some segment of our community. So
is it the will of the board for me to go and try to make the absence, the attendance medically excused piece more clear in our handbooks to reflect board policy? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I would like to hear first, because we haven't heard, what are any negatives, if there are any, to holding off until the next, what, June 28th?
June 28th. Again, people are looking at the handbooks and improving that. I mean, we can definitely, we send out those kind of things anyways. We can just send out that policy or that graphic to make sure that's clear.
I mean, it sounds to me like there's not an enforcement sheet, right? It's a
No, yes, no. I have to see, I have 100% confidence in Mr. Hand's ability to
literature.
decide what this policy is. I just want to make sure it's clear, whatever that policy is, that it's clear. Because for some people, it's maybe not.
Also, as context, it may be good to note that annually we meet as an administrative team of principals with our county truancy officer, whose full-time job is to manage Ohio Revised Code and House bill updates as it relates to school attendance to advise us, and that's where that flow chart and graphic came from, was getting rid of ambiguities and making sure we were all clear. So, and then we work with her individually as situations arise, and typically, just like all medical conditions, context matters. Everybody has a story and a predicament, and life happens to them. So it's kind of case by case as well within that framework.
I'm just asking what the will of the board is for me to, if it's to table this and for me to go back and check all the handbooks and make sure that it's much clearer the medically excused absences piece. Okay, again, that's different than exam exemption conversation. I'm just trying to figure out what the will of the board is for me to do.
I don't know if there's a unanimous vote before.
I
I personally don't care.
I
Like-
move to postpone voting on the handbook until the June 28th meeting.
I'm going to step into some nerd stuff. So we have a motion on the table, and there's many ways we can do this, but there is a motion on the table to approve all 4 of the handbooks, and it has been duly seconded. So if you want, I can explain a couple options, or unless you want to try to make another motion. Option 1 is the person, who is Mrs. Dorn, can choose to take back her motion if she wants to. We can move forward with that motion, and it either passes or it doesn't. Somebody can move to table that motion, which is all 4 of them. Then I guess somebody could make a motion after that passes or fails, to do 3 of them, but not all 4.
And I want to add,
Please.
you know, it could be also, if it's approved with the notion that I'm going to go back and work on and make sure they're clear so we don't wait till June 28th, we can get this done sooner than that, but that can maybe be another option.
I would like to move a formal amendment that we add to the first motion with the understanding that Dr. Kozad and Mr. Can will review the exam exemption policy section and make any improvements they see fit.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Dorn. So now we can talk about nerd stuff. We can talk about only my amendment.
Okay, I have a question though.
Sure.
Is the attendance thing is through all 4 books? So the attendance is all through all 4 books?
Cool. I'll change my motion with your permission that you talk to whoever you want to talk to. And you all make any changes you see fit. I'll help you out later. But they would pass tonight with my amendment.
Again, to make that excessively absence and the absence piece clear. Yes, that's the
And
gist of it.
any improvements you see fit, whatever those may or may not be. Any more discussion about only my amendment to have Dr. Kozad and his team review and perhaps make improvements to the exam exemption attendance policy?
I just don't really care for that, because it just leaves it nebulous, and it's kind of kicking the can down the road, and, you know, there's not clarity. Whereas if we have it with an event as the next meeting, it's clear what the change has been, it's formalized, it's done. And there's a read-ahead opportunity for the community with the board docs.
I disagree, because the policy is 100% already set. It's just trusting our administrators to summarize that appropriately, having heard the concerns. I fully trust that our administrators can summarize the board policy that is firmly set and is not changing, so that our our handbooks.
And why was it written this way last year? I mean, there's just a few things that need,
No, these, it's the same as last year.
I know, it's the same as last year, and
Right.
so neither year included that excessive absences don't include medically excused absences. It wasn't written either
Not
year
in the
there.
summarized policy, but in effect, in being carried out and in true policy.
Okay. Well, I hope so. I thought, we were supposed to read all these and look for things that needed changed. I thought that was why we had to read them in the group.
And I don't disagree with that. I am merely saying that I think that if we brought up a concern, Dr. President understands the concern, I trust that he's capable of making any corrections necessary, having been brought to his attention, and that we don't need to micromanage that at a further meeting.
And I personally like that if it can get passed tonight, I think we should try to do that. And I think my amendment allows both sides.
And again, just to make it clear, just to make those things clear in the policy, it's not in our handbooks, not to change anything, but to make what is already in there clear. With the attendance policy, medically excused, just to make things clear, not to change anything.
Correct.
Yep.
If you do it.
Sure.
On your amendment, it is to approve the policies in for Dr.
So my amendment, which we will have to vote on here in a second, is only to add language to the first big motion.
Okay.
To have Dr. Kozad and his team review and make improvements as they see fit in the exam exemption sections.
And the attendant and
In the attendance and the exam exemption section. But in the attendance.
Attendance and exam, just the exam exemption, just in the exam exemption, absence piece? Right.
No.
Attendance all.
It's really just in the definition of excessive absence.
And medically excused.
Well, that's part of the definition of excessive absence.
Yeah, on page 10, it says 65-hour policy. So on page 10, it says 65-hour policy on the high school. It says up to 65 hours of absence, excluding medically excused absences. So that is categorized as excessively absent by the state. So what you were saying is that that is not clear enough in the policy.
I'm just saying it needs to be written right over here. And this excessively absent definition right here on page 11 just needs to include the, medically excused absences.
Okay, a little more clear on page 11.
That's
Right.
all. That would
Okay.
be super helpful.
Okay, again, to make it clear, not to change
Right.
anything, but
I mean,
to make it clear.
The board policy 5200 has it all.
Okay. And just the high schools.
All the handbooks have that section.
Okay, so what we're about to vote on is not passing the handbooks. That's the main motion. We're only going to vote on my amendment, which allows them to go talk and make improvements. We will then, after that, come back to the main motion of approving the handbooks. So please call the roll only on my amendment.
So if this passes, then that's a separate.
So if this passes, it is part of the main motion to pass the handbooks.
This passes, the handbooks pass.
No, no. So we are not, what we are not voting on is passing the handbooks. What we're about to vote on is only my amendment to tie their review and perhaps improvements to the handbook.
Then we go to the whole thing.
And then, whether that passes or fails, we go back to the main motion later, which is approving or denying the handbooks. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Clear as mud?
Sense.
So voting only on my amendment to ask them to go and review it and make potential improvements.
Okay, can we adjourn that then one more time, because I don't know if that's what this is.
No.
You want to say it?
Yes or no?
Dr. Kozad and his team to review, and sorry, I don't know what all sections we're talking about, to review the sections under discussion and make improvements as they see fit to make sure that they match board policy.
Are they gonna still do that if the main, motion fails?
No.
Well, they still can, go make it, if the main motion fails, and we don't pass the handbooks at all, then obviously some changes are gonna get made.
They're not gonna draw it.
Bring it back.
I need
The whole shebang has to come back.
We've got the main motion to pass on the handbooks. I'm making a tiny amendment to that, which you can approve or disapprove, to let them go and review it and make things clearer to match board policy.
That we can pass the whole thing tonight and allow them after this to make a little tweak to that little area.
So you can vote yes for my amendment to allow them to go and make improvements, and then you still have the right to vote no on all the handbooks in the main motion next.
And then we would need another motion to table after
No.
that. No?
Once they're, if
Okay, so-
they're voted down, and they're not adopted.
Okay, but if they're tabled, then it's a different situation.
Correct. So
She
what we
motioned-
could
She
do.
motioned to table, she already motioned.
No, I did not hear any motion.
I think Annie, Dr. Pryor,
Well, I
Her motion.
motion to postpone, but
to table.
But it wasn't a second.
I did not hear the words, I make a motion, I heard discussion.
I heard her say it.
I said,
her thoughts.
well, I said I moved to postpone, but, and no one heard it.
But it wasn't seconded,
I-
and then you made your motion and it was seconded, so that's what's currently on the floor.
If I missed that, I should have.
I would say her motion.
Well, right now, we have a motion and a second for my amendment. So how about, if you understand the motion, and let me know if you don't understand it. But let's vote on that and then cross the next bridge. Is everybody clear what you would be voting on for my amendment? Okay? All right, please call the roll only on my amendment.
Okay. Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
No.
Dr. Pryor,
No.
Mrs. Anderson.
No.
Cool, okay, so motion fails. So now we're back to the main motion, which is recommend approval of revisions to student parent handbooks for the 2024-2025 school year. That's it. Now, if people want to, you can make a motion to table.
I would make a motion to table
Second.
I'm sorry, until when, we should say?
until the June 28th meeting,
Okay.
or if it takes longer to make revisions after that, whatever, Dr. Kozak feels want.
Okay,
Second.
so you second that? Okay, so Dr. Pryor moved to table this until the June 28th meeting, seconded by Mr. Price. Any more discussion on that motion?
I guess I have a question, is everyone, before we table and have, before we potentially table and we have them go back and fix this, whatever, make things more clear. Other individuals brought up having an issue with having an absence requirement at all associated with the exam exemptions. So I don't want to table something, have them make everything more clear, and then come back and have people still dislike that there is an absence portion to the exam exemption policy.
I don't love there being an attendance thing, just simply because then we're encouraging sick kids to come to school. However,
We're not.
I'm
Because
just
those
saying.
don't count.
Right, but I'm just saying, we're encouraging kids to, to do this. I'm sorry, whatever Mr. Hand wants is what I go with. So I'm fine to leave that there. I just want it more clear as to,
I feel, I certainly want to encourage sick kids to stay home as part of being responsible. And I do hear of a lot of kids who are, I'm homeschool sick anyway because I don't want to lose my exam exemption. But I think clarifying what is in board policy here might solve all those problems. Because as it's written, in this handbook right now, they don't know that medically excused absence is don't count against them. It's not written in there, okay? It's written in the 65-hour policy. There's no reference to the exam exemption in that 65-hour policy paragraph, and the exam exemption paragraph doesn't mention the 65-hour policy paragraph, so it just says it references excessive absences, and that section doesn't mention that medical ones are excused. So parents are confused and people don't know. But I think clarifying that to say, hey, medically excused absences don't count. And if you update what is a medically excused absence section to say, hey, and actually, according to board policy, students can have 10 medically excused absences per year without a doctor's note.
That's per your 65 hours.
65 hours, it's not.
It says, I
Okay,
that
but, yeah,
policy, but you
well-
can check that. I could be wrong. You can just check that stuff.
No, our board, I'm backing up. Our board policy does say a student may have up to 10 medically excused absences. That wouldn't necessarily mean that would be individual absences, like appointments or whatever, I assume. Without a doctor's note, but with a phone call from a parent or guardian. Medical excused absences will be accepted through this process for students participating both in person and so I think board policy 5200 is very clear. But that's not my question. My question is, do we have, or is anyone going to come back when if this does in fact get tabled? Is anyone going to come back and then want to rehash there being any sort of absence policy associated with the exam exemptions?
No, and just for extra information, all Greene County schools have some sort of attendance feature except for Beaver Creek. Everybody else has got 8 days, perfect attendance is 2 exemptions, 98% or higher, so for us to have attendance tied to it is not unusual.
So the motion on the floor is to table for the next meeting. Any conversation about specifically that? Can you please call the roll on the motion to table this until June 28th?
Mrs. Dorn,
No.
Mr. Kinsey,
No.
Mr. Price. Yes. Dr. Pryor,
Yeah.
Mrs. Anderson.
Yes.
All right, so motion passes, so this gets tabled.
Oh, sorry.
Ooh, you gotta make it work.
No. I thought you meant the motion, yeah, the motion is
No,
tabled.
the
Got it. The motion of
motion
it being
to
tabled
table.
passed, never
The
mind.
motion to table passes, so this has to please be on the agenda for the June 28th meeting. All right, so then we now move on.
And just, again, I'm sorry, I don't want to, so
Clear as mud.
the will of the board is for me to go back and to clarify in each of the handbooks about medically excused, excessively absent, and habitually truant absences that is in the board policy, and make sure that those are in our handbooks. That's it. Clarity. It's talking about clarity about what those things are. Nothing to do with exam exemptions. Of changing the requirements of that, making things more clear.
Right.
That the requirement of a student has reached the threshold of excessively absent, what does that mean?
Right.
Making that clear.
Yes.
Talking about clarity.
Right, so
Okay.
parents don't
Thank you.
get
I just want to know what I'm supposed to be doing, so clarity. All right, got it. Thank you.
I think we are on H. Steve, please.
Okay, I guess before we move on to that, is there any other, so we don't have a, is there any other concerns with any other handbooks or any other things in the other handbooks or any of the handbooks? So,
the page numbers and maybe jump.
yes, so when there are changes, the page numbers will all be corrected and so forth. So is there any other concerns or issues with anything else in the other handbooks so that I can make sure I can go back and change those so that we can get these things passed? So any other concerns or issues with anything else in our handbooks?
student fees, correct. Student fees, so recommend approval of school fees for students in grades preschool to 12 for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson.
Again, some of these have increased a little bit, some others have decreased, but again, very similar to what it's been in the past, at least the last year.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn.
Yes.
All right, donations to recommend acceptance of donation with gratitude from the Bellbrook Sugar Maple Festival Committee in the amount of $1,500 to cover unpaid student fees in the Bellbrook Creek Intermediate Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Anderson, second. Awesome.
Yep.
Very nice.
Thank you very much to them. And those students and families will be much appreciated.
How did they become aware of that and focused on that? I think it's commendable. I'm just curious how they even, I wouldn't even think about it.
I think it's a
Mr.
shoe.
Phelps, do you have an idea?
It's a shoe.
Logan's.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it has a lot to do with Sugar Maple Festival, chair people working in the Bell Creek cafeteria.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
Logan's wife and Tasha Shoes got big.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
We do recover quite a bit though from my collections efforts.
Which include what?
Cold calling sometimes.
Knock on their door.
Cleaning out lockers.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey.
Yes.
all right, moving on to second semester bullying report as required by law. We are required to report our bullying numbers and then also posting them on our website. So our bullying numbers are ranked there. Again, these kind of ebb and flow from semester to semester, year to year. We are up a little bit overall from the first semester, but again, it's kind of ebb and flow from semester to semester. Again, anytime that someone is accusing someone of bullying or being mean to folks or harassing, our principals and our staff members take those things very seriously, investigate those, and we have high expectations of our students. And even though there's numbers there to say, there's numbers on there, those are not excuses. Kids are pretty well behaved, and they're going to be held accountable for those things. So I think our administrators, staff members, especially our administrators, do a fantastic job of following through with those students and trying to get them to be nice human beings and being nice to other kids.
And the number for the high school where it says included one, and that's Green County Learning Center, is that right?
Correct.
One of our students out there was that.
Any comments on that topic? Policy changes?
Sorry, I think I started speaking before there was the first one.
Oh, I'm sorry, is that something to approve?
Yes.
My fault, I just thought it was under items for discussion.
No.
It just is what it is.
I just thought
Oh,
it was-
yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah. All right. And then next there's policy, technical changes, policy draft changes. So this is first read, the second read will be in July, not on June 20th, it will be in July. So this first technical changes are just, so these only need one reading though, the technical changes, it's just removing Mr. Whalen and Mrs. Sigmund, since they are leaving and or retiring, and replacing them, bless you, with Mr. Eckley, our new manager of business, and Mrs. Hill, our middle school principal. So that is just technical changes on all of those policies, and then first read of the draft changes to the other board policies. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all these, but just to highlight one, we have entrance requirements for kindergarten. I just want to make it clear that that is not for this coming school year. This is for the 25-26 school year. This is not for this coming school year of changing that entrance
requirement from September 30th to August 1st. I know that had been in discussion, and we discussed it, a while back and so forth. But for not this school year, but for the next school year, 25-26.
And we did talk about during that meeting about that yes, we'll start really publicizing that, making sure families know, but wait until after the school year starts